Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, she's a lecturer at the Department of Film, Television and Media Studies at the University of Auckland. Digital feminist and blogger Phoebe Fletcher. And here's the Darth Vader of the internet, minus the moment of redemption at the end, right-wing storm blogger Cameron Slater. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, Week 2 after the quake, 10,000 unrepairable homes that John Key didn't actually confirm, demolition of as many heritage buildings as Jerry can get his hands on, and the New Zealand cops bashing mentally unstable looters. Is the government response getting better or worse? Issue 2, Botany by-election turns out to be the kind of nil-all victory only soccer fans get excited about, but does the result suggest the government will have a hard time during the election in November? Issue 3 tonight, Telecommunications Minister Stephen Joyce gives MediaWorks a $43 million loan while his government cripples public broadcasting. That won't lead the TV3 6pm news. And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with Issue 1. It's been a week of more grief and hurt for our Christchurch whānau, and the government's response is leaving a lot to be desired. Phoebe, John Key didn't get any real confirmation that his statement of 10,000 homes needing to be demolished was based on actual facts. Is this a stumble by an inexperienced Prime Minister? We are not talking financial transactions here, we're talking people's lives.
I think it is a stumble, and I don't think he did have confirmation at the time. He's now saying that it was the EQC, of course, that gave him the figure. But I really don't think, that tallies with the number from the civil defence, which is around 2,000 homes.
Right. I think civil defence is blowing smoke, quite frankly. I've been speaking to some journalists down there and a few of my contacts down there, and they're actually saying that 10,000's light, and I think we'll see that bear out in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, but I think it's very important at this stage in terms of the amount of stress that people are under to actually get the figures right. And if that means waiting a couple more weeks, I note that Regan Potangaroa, who is a scientist who is engaged in kind of rescue after disasters, is saying that we are making all the same mistakes as Haiti. Basically in the way that we're stickering houses, that these stickers actually mean it's not safe to go into the building, but it means that people's houses are getting demolished nearly straight away. And the other thing is too, I'm not sure which company it is, but apparently there is one demolition company that is also claiming the contents of inside the houses before they're
Helen Clark said it was worse than Haiti. So, I mean, she came down here and told us that and then buggered off back to New York, leaving us with that wonderful pearl of wisdom.
You have touched on something. A lot of journalists down there, a lot of people who are actually
they
quite
know
familiar
that it's
with
over
it
10,000.
are saying that it's a lot of houses. But the point surely is that he should have waited until it's confirmed.
And then you pinkos would have been bashing him up, saying he doesn't know what he's doing. Why can't we have some answers? Demand answers because he's a PM.
I think
That's exactly what you would
Bob
be doing.
Parker was able to negotiate the speed of this, wasn't it? He was the one who said, hey,
the problem with civil defence is that they're concentrating on the central city area. Yep. They haven't pulled their heads out of their butts and gone out into the suburbs where there are people having to use buckets, where there are people that are struggling to get shelter. And this is what the journalists were saying to me yesterday.
Would you be concerned with Phoebe's comments that a demolition group down there also claiming?
Oh, look, there's a whole lot of people.
Vested interest?
Absolutely, there'll be vested interest in there. I mean, a case in point is Mitre 10. The local Mitre 10 stores down there are doing a great job. People are coming saying, look, we need some timber, they're handing it out and that's fine. Mitre 10 as a parent company though, as the master franchise holder, is now running a campaign where people can go in and they can buy vouchers, which then get given to the Salvation Army to be distributed to the people of Christchurch. But what's actually Mitre 10 nationwide doing to dip into their pockets to help the people of Christchurch? It's just a blatant bit of disaster recovery on their part to get people to spend money on vouchers for Mitre 10 where they benefit.
I would absolutely agree with you, and I think there's far too many companies that took advantage of the Christchurch situation, and also the Pike River mine too.
Well,
I believe there were advertisements in the background when John Key was speaking on the Pike River mine disaster. But I do think there is a need to hold back on that information and make sure that it's correct. People are under a lot of stress at the moment. We saw after the last earthquake where no one died, we saw domestic violence and suicide rates rise. Like, the fact is that you know, they really need to know the figures, they need to know the numbers. The speculation is not helpful. I mean, we already had Jerry Brownlee say we should go through, you know, I'd love to bulldoze.
Let's get into that. Okay, Jerry Brownlee seems to have gotten carried away with his desire to demolish heritage buildings when it was the so-called modern buildings where most of the people died. And now we're seeing the danger of handing one person so much power from the legislation of the
But
first
at
place.
what point do you draw the line on what's heritage? I mean, in my mind, buildings built in the 60s, there'll be some, you know, bunker mentality type.
But he's not talking about those buildings.
No, but you are. You brought them up saying that
exactly. But that's the counter to his argument of getting rid of the heritage buildings.
No, it's not, because I wouldn't describe those as
down.
modern buildings. 1963, I think one of them was, in 1971, all outside of the regulations for strengthening. So in actual fact, they are old and they are dungers. The problem I have with this protection of heritage at all costs is that you do end up with an old dunger of a building. Like in Wellington's a classic case where we've got all these buildings that are protected for heritage. The owners of them get told by the council, you need to bring this up to earthquake specifications. Now that building's actually not worth having as a building because the cost of strengthening it and bringing it up to earthquake standards, which we've all just seen in Christchurch, those earthquake standards are meaningless to the earth. They don't really care. If it picks up a building and throws it back down with the force of 2.5 times gravity, it doesn't matter what standards you've got, things are going to break. But what you've got is building owners now that are going to be faced with councils all around the country coming in and saying, make this... So you're actually going to see those heritage buildings bold anyway because it's uneconomic to strengthen them when they can build a new building to earthquake specifications.
Is this the concern of giving so much power to the hands of just one person? This is a lot of the criticism that was made at the last piece of legislation. Jerry Brownlee has this power now, and if it just does pop into his head that he wants to demolish, he does have that power.
Have you noticed the streets in central Christchurch? If you want to retain the heritage buildings, you're going to have to pick all those freaking bricks up and plaster them back in place.
I'm not saying that we should retain all the heritage buildings. I'm saying that the speculation is unhelpful for people that are under a lot of stress. If it's going to be 3 weeks to 3 months before we know the amount of houses that need to be demolished, then they really need to wait and let that process occur, and that's why I think we've seen Key slightly backtrack on this, because it really was too early to start
pulled Jerry back in line too, didn't they?
But if you look at, I mean, we've had an earthquake and a building may appear to be sound on the outside. If we'd been less fortunate and had like a Cyclone Tracy, where the whole of Darwin was completely levelled, there wasn't any argument over whether the buildings were going to be rebuilt. They were gone. And Darwin got rebuilt. You know, there was a commission that was put in place there.
But I would suggest the heritage and age of
it's not a lot of heritage buildings.
Yeah, but the heritage of Christchurch is a lot larger than Darwin, isn't it?
Look, I think this clinging to heritage, or the so-called title of heritage, I mean, at what point do you draw the line? I mean, you could draw the line at...
Isn't that for the people of Christchurch to decide?
But who's the people of Christchurch?
Bob Parker's the man at the moment.
That's a lovely phrase that everyone draws on to say things like nondescript California bungalows in Kohimarama and other jalopies.
But we're not talking that, are we? We're talking about the very heritage of Christchurch, though.
I know, but what is heritage? You know, I mean...
But the people of Christchurch will decide that, not Jerry, surely.
In 50 years' time, brand new buildings that are built as a result of the earthquake could be considered heritage. Look at Napier. We consider the buildings in Napier to be heritage buildings. And there's not a lot of buildings that were there after the 1932 earthquake.
Phoebe, Leanne Dalzell has been staunch and vocal about the lack of support to the eastern suburbs. Is it a case of the enormity of the quake, or just another example of the poor being last on the list to receive aid?
I think it is the enormity of the quake, actually. I think, you know, they were really stretched, all of the emergency services, and I think, you know, this and the notion that 10,000 houses might be bold, yes, the figure may go up, but, you know, the sort of speculation is showing really that, you know, while they might have had a sort of dry run last time where no one dies, that they still have a long way to go in terms of...
I don't think you can adequately prepare for the enormity of something like that, where you suddenly have 50,000 people who all of a sudden need to use a portaloo. Again, I go back to the earthquake in Napier. There weren't things such as portaloos back then. If you go back to San Francisco, where the majority of the city was just completely devastated, you know, at the beginning of, you know, was it 1901, I think it was, there weren't things like portaloos. We've become a little bit soft And I'm not criticising the people of Christchurch, but honestly, there was a whole lot of people out there that were doing the necessaries to get into the survival thing. But
and you'd be pushing for international aid through Oprah and Letterman when that money should be going to people in much worse situations.
No, actually closer to home. But I was talking to the head of ADRA New Zealand, who have lined up sanitarium to provide a lot of food. They've opened up their bore, done actually just giving away heaps of things. And he said to me the most striking thing that's missing from everybody's disaster kits, even after the first earthquake, is the lack of emergency shelter. Sure, you've got your buckets and things like that, but very few people had the things like tarpaulins and that sort of tents and things like that, which if you go back to San Francisco and also go back to Napier, people were living in tents for a long time. That was hardy. You did that. You had to. There was no other option. Now we've got to have portaloos. We've got to have this. It's just a matter of survival. And
it's called living the 21st century in a first
no,
world
but
country.
it makes us
Cam,
soft.
you blogged that you wanted looters to be shot in the belly so they would die slowly. You were blogging that when Cornelius Aries Smith Vorkamp was bashed by police and arrested for looting. I checked the same day. Checked the same day. Of course, it now turns out that Cornelius Aries Smith Vorkamp has autism. Did your plan to gut shoot looters have any appeal process after they were gut shot?
Well, that's what the paramedics come along. They've saved the people who have been gut shot, and that's where the appeal process comes in. But sure, I mean, there's emotions, and people say things in high emotion
stoked,
times.
By people
absolutely.
like you.
But you talked just a short while ago about the increase in suicide rates and domestic violence and those sorts of things. These are gut, visceral reactions to what is a horrible situation. And in the case of this chap, it seems on the rather light side, stealing light bulbs and things like that. I don't know if that really warranted a hiding, but when you look at the other chaps,
he has autism. That's the major issue.
But if you look at some of the other chaps that were, walking down the street with TVs and all of that sort of thing, there is a graduated series.
You made an important post on Tumiki today, I think, about the kind of lynch mob mentality that was up.
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, the sort of thing that doesn't justify a beating. Well, obviously our police should not be beating people after they are in custody for a start.
For a start.
But we don't know if it was after. He could have fallen over some rubble or something like that.
The second point is, that, we have the mental health organisations coming out at the moment and giving press releases and saying, look, we actually need more attention on people with mental health illnesses in Christchurch. And when I was reading the paper this morning, I was looking at Justice Crosby, who's taking a hard line on looters.
Very hard.
Now, reading that article, there was one guy that stole a toaster for his family because he had stale bread. There was another methadone addict that was trying to break in. One thing that really struck me was that this idea of kind of taking a hard line on looters. Yes, looting does happen after disasters, like the floods in Lower Hutt, for example, but you've got to remember that the majority of people in Christchurch, everyone in Christchurch has been through an extraordinarily traumatic event. People are not coping. You cannot expect people to behave rationally. We know this after major disasters, and we know this about wars as well. That people do not necessarily behave rationally.
You've picked up on three things which are definitely at the light end of the scale. But there are series of scum that are out there that are actually going around and preying on people.
What about the landlords who are putting rents up 150%? Are you going to be doing a campaign against them?
Well, I can't. What's the rationale?
Looting,
what's the rationale? What's the rationale?
Isn't that looting?
Well, it depends on the rationale. Why is it going? Why are they putting up rents?
Because they can. Okay, a question to both. Why can't John Key show the same optimism for the 10,000 houses that he has shown the AMI Stadium to host his Blessed World Cup? There's a lot of optimism for that stadium, not so much for the 10,000 houses.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with John Key on that.
You know that stadium.
If the stadium's rooted, bowl it.
Don't you? You know that stadium.
I don't know enough about it, but if it's rooted, it's rooted. The fact that they're not talking about it suggests it is.
But he's got optimism for that stadium, but not the 10,000 houses, doesn't he?
Well, I don't know if he's got justified optimism for that.
I don't think he has justified optimism for that
Okay,
either.
who wins, who loses so far from the government's response? You still saying the government's doing a good job?
Well, they're doing a reasonable job. The enormity of the task is such that I don't think you can even comprehend. I mean, I published a map of the portaloos in East Christchurch, and frankly, I was stunned that we had that many portaloos in the whole country, let alone in one suburb.
Yeah, yeah.
So
it's a huge problem.
So it's a huge problem, and it's one that's not going to go away in 6 months or 3 months or even 9 months or even a year. It's going to be 15 years of a rebuild. It's actually going to be good ultimately for the people of Christchurch, in that there's going to be a lot of economic activity. There's going to be a lot of rebuilding. There's going to be a lot of jobs that come up as a result of it. Although there's an immediate hurt there, and some of the jobs not being there because the businesses have ceased to exist or their location. Yeah. But it will recover, and I think it will recover very, very well.
Phoebe?
I agree. I think we are dealing with this reasonably, in that we haven't had a large-scale disaster like this before. If you look at Australia, they are also altering their kind of media response to disasters, because we had, Australian media ringing people that were trapped on their cell phones, which is, Media Watch did a thing on it on national radio. It's disgusting.
Australian media, man.
Convict mentality.
But, I think everybody is learning off us. I do think that John Key and Jerry Brownlee need to tone down on the speculation. These are very stressed people.
Well,
the
media needs to tone down on speculation.
Thank you, panel. Issue 2. Let's speculate about something we can all agree to attack. Botany by-election result is in, and if that's a victory for National, then Charlie Shen is a quiet chap who enjoys flax weaving and pan flutes. Phoebe, Labour turned their margin of loss from 28% to 21% for a candidate who assured people he wouldn't win. Labour have plenty to smile about in this, don't they?
No.
Asking Phoebe. Do you look like Phoebe?
Stop butting in while I'm interrupting.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it was an interesting by-election. I think we've got the New Citizen Party that got 10%
we'll
there.
Get into that.
So, really there has been some fluctuations in this. I think they can be happy that they've increased their percentage, but I don't think it's perhaps much of a gain as what Phil Goff is saying.
Cam, last month on this show, you and Chris Trotter both claimed the New Citizens Party would not get over 800 votes.
Okay, so we're 500
They ended up getting almost twice that and put ACT into 4th place. As John Armstrong pointed out, extrapolated across other Auckland electorates, the New Citizens Party could badly splinter the National Party. This is something that we haven't considered.
Well, for a start, you should never listen to a journalist who's based in Wellington talking about Auckland.
Yeah.
Right, for the start. The New Citizens Party got over 10%, just over 10% in this.
Certainly higher than you suggested.
500 votes more than I suggested.
Almost twice the amount.
They managed to do that in the electorate that has the highest Asian concentration in the whole of the country.
Yep.
I would suggest there wouldn't be another single electorate in the rest of the country where they could get that same result. If they can't get any better than that in Botany, then they're certainly not going to do that extrapolating across Auckland, let alone the rest of the country. So it's a little bit strange thinking that they'll take that into the general election as an overall result. And if you take North Shore electorates, for example, they'd barely scrape through 1%. With the vast, what do you call it, the bulk of the North Shore.
The bulk of the North Shore.
They're not going to vote for a New Citizens Party.
So you're saying that they're going to look at that. They're going to look at it and say, "Oh, look, we didn't do nearly as well as we thought. We're not going to do it."
No, they will look at that, and because they're that short-sighted politically.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at the result, at their policies and the things that Paul Young was saying in the public meetings and things that I went to, he's further right-wing than the National Party. Further right-wing than ACT.
Oh yeah, way out there.
If you look at the ACT numbers on the number of votes, it looks appalling. If you look at the percentage, it's just under 5%. Now
again, in an electorate where they would have done very well, and they did very well last time.
Now they had an appalling candidate, someone to the left of Michael Wood, even. All right, she is a hopeless public speaker, and if they can get just under 5%.
You're very hopeful. Phoebe, has there been an underestimation how much influence Beijing can buy in New Zealand politics?
No.
No, I don't. I agree with Cameron. I think those results would be unusual to see outside of Auckland.
Yep.
Because this is where the concentration of immigration is.
Yep.
But yeah, in some ways, in terms of Auckland politics, they have. Yes.
Yeah. Cam, how does this result reflect on ACT being shunted to 4th place?
Well, it's embarrassing, and the guys when they turned up at.
They sad?
They were a little sad,
Did
but
you give
then
them a hug?
they're also trying to be hopeful, saying they've got 4.5%. But I think the saddest person out of all of this is Phil Goff, claiming that he's raised that there was a swing to Labor.
Yeah, great
If there's a swing to Labor, it has to be from someone. Now, we know it wasn't from National because their percentage of the vote held up. So who was it from? Well, it's very easy to see. It was from the Greens. They didn't even have a candidate. So you can't claim that
last question. How quickly will Jamie Lee Ross become a lip-synced party line puppet? You can count it in the milliseconds if you want.
I think you're dreaming on that.
Really?
But you have to be perfectly lucid, and something that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to talking about National Party people.
Yeah.
He's a backbench MP.
He certainly will
right? There's going to be more backbench MPs come in the.
Well, you hope so.
Well, there will be.
Okay. So weeks, months? Are you saying lip sync puppet?
I don't believe he's a lip sync puppet.
Oh, okay. Lip sync puppet. But I saw that Beatson interview. My God, he was a lip sync puppet.
And what was the result on the election night?
Yeah, awful. Is he a lip sync puppet or not? Well, how quickly?
I think it's hard to argue that across any party.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Okay,
You
thank
failed
you,
on that.
panel.
You got
Coming
beaten
up
twice then, Bomber.
Yeah. Thank you, panel. Coming up, Telecommunications Minister Stephen Joyce gives MediaWorks, a company he used to own, a super sweet deal to the tune of 43 million. Why does that smell funny? Citizen A is back after the break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Citizen A. We're reviewing the week with bloggers Phoebe Fletcher and perpetual right-wing candidate Cameron Slater. Issue 3 this week, Telecommunications Minister Stephen Joyce greenlights a deal for the Radio Broadcast Association to defer their radio licences for the next 20 years. And MediaWorks in particular benefit to the tune of $43 million. So many questions to ask. Phoebe, why are we propping up foreign-owned broadcasters to the tune of $43 million while crucifying public broadcasters?
It's a good idea.
Phoebe.
Yeah, do I look like you, Cameron?
There might be a passing resemblance.
No, yes.
To a blind man.
I mean, this was negotiated in 2009, and there are a number of companies that got this. So
Yep.
Radio Rema, for example, had the same kind of conditions. Although I do agree this is problematic when we've got a 5-year cap on funding for national radio.
Good idea.
And you know, that we're not getting the same level of attention paid to public broadcasters. There is also the argument, you know, if MediaWorks is Australian owned, why are we giving interest rates that are a third to a half of what companies that are failing would get from a bank?
Exactly.
So why is the Cabinet acting like a bank?
Cam,
Cry me a
before
river of
Ironbridge
tears.
brought MediaWorks off Cam West, it was called RadioWorks, and RadioWorks used to be owned by none other than Stephen Joyce. Why is the current telecommunications minister cutting sweet deals to a company he used to own?
You've got 3 degrees of separation there and a number of years. I think you're drawing a very long bow.
That's the best you've got as a comeback?
No, I've got plenty
Oh,
more.
okay, let's hear it.
But I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
sure
please.
you can cope with it because you actually have to understand how to read a set of accounts. And you're talking about, you know, in your intro about gifting them
Yep.
$43 million.
Deferring the payment.
It's a deferred
Yep.
payment. No money's changed hands. They've simply got an extended period of time, and the license is for 20 years.
Yep.
There's frankly an usurious rate of interest applied to that. But maybe Phoebe's got a point there, and it's not a rate that they'd be able to access themselves.
Well, anywhere else, could they?
But what are the options? Static? I mean, that would only make some Vickers in
Well, hold
Wellington
on.
and five Pinkos in Wellington plus you.
Well, let's
happy
get
to
onto
have the
that. Let's get
static
onto that.
and only the
Phoebe,
national program there.
Stephen Joyce said that if he hadn't given MediaWorks the money, then all their radio frequencies would have had to have been turned over to the government. Does that mean that there would be no more sex tourism and exploitation competitions on the Rock? I mean, I think that's actually, that kind of works,
I
doesn't
would
it?
love to
Wouldn't that
see
be
The Rock
wonderful?
fail. I think they are the
Wouldn't
most sexist,
Well, don't listen
misogynist
to
radio
them.
station.
Yeah.
I mean, let's
Don't
face
listen
it,
to them.
the last 2 competitions that they've had,
Yeah.
send in a photograph of your girlfriend's breasts and why she
Awesome.
deserves a breast job. Okay, the last
There's a market
competition
for
that
that.
they've had, okay, which is something that you would not get away with in the United Kingdom, for example,
Well, do we
is
want to be like them?
basically on the exploitation of poor women in the Ukraine.
But there's a
They ran
market for
a
it.
winner-wife competition.
Yep.
You know, I think that the women of New Zealand should be incredibly offended by that station,
Well,
and we should be demanding it be shut down.
So
Oh,
perhaps,
demanding it.
if it was actually owned by, so if Stephen Joyce's, hey, I've got to hand the frequencies over sort of scenario played out, that would actually be a positive, wouldn't it?
But you're
Now,
applying
Cam,
your standards
the government,
to who, what we should
government
listen
claim they will make money back on the 11.2% loan. But would highly leveraged Ironbridge have been able to get a rate like that on the open market? And again, why are the government bailing out a private business, one which the,
It's not
the minister
bailing
used
it
to,
out.
used
That's
to
just
own?
Pinko spin that they're bailing them out. It's giving a deferred payment, as you said, to the
Yep.
to the
Yeah,
association.
for $43 million.
I suppose you were upset too
deferment.
that the fundies at Radio Rima have taken up that offer as well. You wouldn't want
Yes,
Christian
but
radio
they've
stations
also
online,
raised
would
through
you?
charity $6 million, which they've already paid.
That's right.
And I note, you know, that MediaWorks is a much bigger company.
Would
Well,
they,
it
come
is.
on, they wouldn't have got the 11.2,
This is the
would they?
problem we have when you've got 2 large groups of media organisations in radio that between them control 95%
Yep.
of the radio
Yep.
market.
Yep.
You can't just simply switch it off and say see you later and you've
Well,
got
that wouldn't have
static.
happened. That wouldn't have happened.
How do you know that?
They would have been handed
That's your
over to the
wet
government.
dream, isn't it? That you'd
No, they
have,
would have
that
just
you'd
been
have
handed
the
over to
rock
the
off
government.
off here. Well, handed over to the government. Do we want the government controlling anything? You've just been complaining about the way they are handling Christchurch.
Yep.
How would they handle radio spectrum?
But well, they don't do a bad job with Radio New Zealand. That outrates most of the other radio stations.
Well, considering they don't actually have to pay broadcasting fees, it's no wonder.
But they would. But Ironbridge wouldn't have got the 11.2% on the open
Well,
market,
How does
would
that
they?
equate to ratings?
That's an assumption that you're making there.
Well,
you don't know that.
no, we do know that Ironbridge are leveraged up to the hilt. How would they have gotten a better deal than 11.2?
But you're making an assumption. You can't say that they wouldn't
But the
have got a
fact they
better deal.
took the deal shows that the outside market couldn't have given them a better
Well,
deal.
that was discussed in
Well,
the
that-
cabinet
that makes
meeting, was it?
commercial
That there
sense,
was no
doesn't it?
way that they could have possibly have
makes-
got the same
so
so
deal.
they
makes
couldn't have got. So they couldn't
so
have
that
got the
makes
deal.
commercial sense.
So they couldn't have got the 11.2% on the. But
Let's
surely,
be that as it may.
Be that as it may. Surely, you being the capitalist warrior for capitalism, you find this disgusting that a government should be handing out taxpayer money to prop up.
Well, I
a
think it's
private
disgusting
business.
that the government is charging, $43 million for essentially the right to use thin air.
Oh, is that the best you? Is that it?
No,
that
that's
your
the second best.
Jesus. Okay, both of you, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. How much does this cosy little deal stink? Phoebe.
Well, I mean,
Come on, 1.5. You're struggling.
I don't think it does stink that high,
Yeah,
to be honest.
exactly.
Yep.
Although
There you
I
go.
do think that they should really, it shouldn't really be cabinet.
So you got dealt to again.
What's your ruling? How 1 to 10, 10 being the highest?
Oh, 1 at best.
Okay, I give it a 12. Who wins and who loses by Stephen Joyce handing over $43 million to his former company? Who wins, who loses?
The listeners of New Zealand. win.
Who wins, who loses?
Well, I guess people have a greater diversity, but I would like to see the same attention put onto public broadcasting. And I do think that when there's a 5-year funding cap on things like national
A
radio,
damn
we
good
need to
idea.
seriously be addressing why we are,
Handing out $43 million.
basically.
You could argue that this is public radio now.
This is the only public broadcasting New Zealand has. Let's wrap the show with last word. Phoebe, your last word this week is?
My final word would be on Jerry Mataparai being appointed as Governor General. I do not think it's appropriate for a former head of defence and spy chief to be in that role. We have very important legislation going through at the moment that compromises the civil liberties of New Zealanders, including the SIS Amendment Bill. And while he is widely liked, I think that we need to look at this a bit more closely.
Completely agree. Couldn't agree more. Cam, your final word this week
Sorry, I
is?
just dry my eyes after that little sob story.
Yeah.
My final word is for the Labour Party. They've just done
They're listening.
well, they are. Trevor Mallard's using my lines in Parliament. They've launched their new logo. I would have thought that they could have chosen a better font than the one Obama used.
Why?
And so
Why?
all I'm
It
waiting
worked
for.
for John Key.
Exactly, it worked for John Key.
And so now,
2008.
what I'm expecting now is we're about to see the Labour Party launch a Hope and a change
What,
we
like the
can
National
believe,
Party?
and
Like
a
the
change
National
we
Party?
can believe in
So it's a
campaign.
2008 National Party campaign they're running, is it?
Well, it's still not the fonts that Obama used.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Cam. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. The earthquake has made real in physical terms what the recession has been doing unseen for years. The me first and the gimme gimme mantra of Key's vacant optimism of individual uber alles has been knocked off its shiny aspirational perch by the grim reality of our fellow New Zealanders hurt and dazed. New Zealanders react angrily at what they perceive as state intervention in their lives directly. They look at the repeal of Section 59, which hasn't led to the mass criminalisation appearance as the hysterical proclaimed, and perceive that as the state interfering in the role of the parent and child. But that doesn't mean, as National has interpreted it, that New Zealanders don't want state intervention. We do look to the state to intervene for our collective benefit, and the zeitgeist this quake has brought about is a reawakening of the strength of solidarity. Where does a solo mum find part-time work in Christchurch when her child turns 3 now, Mr. Key? If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Citizen Bomber Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.